The drums beat, the horns sounded, the voices sung praise songs to Shango, Oshun, Elegua, songs of blackness, songs of liberation. I looked into her eyes, I held her hand. She breathed, she pushed, she overcame all obstacles. I sense her power, I'm in awe of it. She pushed some more. A moment later, there he was, the extension of our unified creative life force. She held him, he fed. I held him and told him exactly what my father told me at birth. You came into this world to liberate your people. Now come and master your destiny. Tendai mwari mupeni.
Tendai greetings, kings and queens. My name is Tapvideo ShakaRa Bandaka. I recently became a father. In fact, 8 weeks ago today, I became a father. And since that time, I have been sharing a lot of my reflections on my social media and these kinds of things. And, you know, based upon the responses that I've been getting and the thoughts that I've had, I figured that I'm going to do some reflections on my reflections. So I've been writing them and posting them various places, and I've been looking over them over the last few days. And I figured that I just reflect on what I've already reflected on. And you know, these are, many of them were just like things that I was writing in the moment. In terms of the fact that my son, who is 8 weeks today, was in hospital for a few days. You know what I'm saying? Nothing serious, just on a round of antibiotics. And so I had to take him to get those antibiotics in the morning and in the afternoon. And so I will be waking up at, 4 o'clock in the morning and just reflecting and writing things down. And some of these things I decided to share. What I'm sharing today is the first reflection that I wrote on the morning, just hours after my son was born. A lot of it focuses on, of course, his mother. Yeah, his mother's name is Nahanda Sankofa. And the process that she went through. Yeah. Now, for me, one of the things that I always wanted to do, one of the roles that I always wanted to play in terms of my children coming into the world was to prepare the space, prepare the environment in which they're going to come into the world. And the ideal way to do that is home birth. Yeah. And there's a lot of information out there about home births at the moment. Shout out to my brother and sister in the King family, Fit for a King, King spelled with 2 I's, because they have a brilliant series of videos on home births and the process. It's quite an in-depth, process. Unfortunately, we were not able to go through the home birth process, for reasons which I won't go into. But we did inquire about it, we did look into it, and we might try it, at some point. But this time that wasn't possible. So but I still wanted to be able to prepare the environment as much as I could. And even with that, I wasn't even able to, because he came early, like there was certain things I just didn't have in it. Like when you hear water broke, you have to just run down at the hospital, innit?
Wonderful. Oh man, that was wonderful. Quite an insight, because people don't even talk about home births no more. I mean, it's like they don't it doesn't exist for us. But we should look into everything that makes us healthy, self-sufficient, and that, of course, brings our consciousness and awareness of our history, and so that we can be a people again. We're not ourselves. We are what our enslavers, those who managed to create the gun from gunpowder, not that they invented it, but they was able to take it to a higher level in terms of making it a weapon of mass destruction, which enabled them to conquer some of the most devastating warriors on the planet, and that was us. So we cannot we cannot not take science and knowledge of everything that is around us for granted. We have to become the masters of knowledge that we once were. So today I want to welcome our guest, Brother ShakaRa. That was his channel that we introduced him to. Brother Shaka, you want to give people the name of your channel and how they can, and we can do this at the end. And I think God King will probably put it up there so people can go to your channel and see the videos that you have.
Yes, sir.
We need all of the information we can get right now on ourselves, and it's such a beautiful learning experience. I'm really excited. I'm excited at this time, just interviewing people like yourself and getting to know more about you. Now, I was talking to you a little earlier, and you're ShakaRa, and you were telling me that you were born in the UK and have spent all of your life. And we were looking back over some of the events you've been involved in, and find out I was at some of those events. You was a young man then. You say you were a boy?
Yes. I would have been. I mean, so being raised in the Pan-African community in the UK, there are certain events that you just are definitely going to be exposed to. Africa Liberation Day, or ALD, is one of them. It's an annual event. And my parents have been taking me all of my life. I'm a member of the Al-Kebulan Revivalist movement, and the organization that hosts Africa Liberation Day is the Pan-African Congress movement. And so my father, Brother Leader Bandaka, who is the spiritual leader of the Al-Kebulan Revivalist movement, is really a student of the Pan-African Congress movement in terms of how he came into the Pan-African community in London before him and a number of other brothers and sisters began the Al-Kebulan Revivalist movement, and of which he is the leader and the only remaining founding member of that movement, you know. So yeah, Africa Liberation Day was staple annual. There was no question about whether we were going to Africa Liberation Day, wherever it was, whether it was in London, Manchester, Birmingham, which is the places that it normally was, the cities that it normally was hosted in. We were going to be there. So learning that you have been to AOD in London in the 90s means that we must have crossed paths, but I would have been a child. Yeah.
Yeah, while we're here, shout out to Pepe Kai and
yes, sir.
Calvin King, who is one of my brothers from here, who's now living in London, and you probably know him.
Yes.
He knows Pepe Kai, and he was telling me that Pepe Kai was doing well. Right, please pass on to Pepe Kai that we spoke, and reaching out trying to get a hold of him. But let's go more into African Liberation Day, when it was organized, kind of why, and what is happening in London today with African-centered brothers and sisters. Is the struggle there like the struggle here? I spoke with a brother who told me that there's so much interracial marriage in London that he's never seen so many Steph Currys in his life. Steph Curry, a brother here who is a fantastic basketball player.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Okay. He said it's pretty normal. Tell us a little bit about the history of Africans in London and how we're panning out right now. What's happening?
Well, that's an interesting question. Firstly, there's evidence of Africans being here from all the 1600s, and apparently that population was deliberately wiped out and deported from the country after a while. And then you get some more recent history of us being here in the early 1900s. But really, when you're talking about the black presence in the UK, in terms of its sustained presence, we're talking about from the late 1940s, yeah? And the history is simply that after World War II, or more properly referred to as Mass European War II, that they drew the rest of the world into, basically, because Africans, yeah, in the Caribbean and on the continent were under the system of colonialism, many of us were basically imported in, yeah, to the UK to do the jobs that basically the white people in the UK did not want to do, yeah. And so obviously Britain mashed up itself after World War II and needed assistance in terms of putting itself back together, as did the rest of Europe. So Africans from all over the English-speaking Caribbean were drafted in to work the buses and work the trains and you know, conduct all this menial labor. And as well, in the 1940s, the British government instituted this thing called the National Health Service, which is basically public health services. I know I understand in the USA you have a private healthcare system, and so by contrast, and so a lot of my grandparents' generation, a lot of the women were nurses in the NHS. Yeah, so cut a long story short, fast forward, another generation is born in this country. In fact, even before that, you have in 1958 a thing called the Notting Hill race riots. Yeah, and funny thing about Europeans is that when they have a tendency of referring to acts of aggression by themselves against other people as riots or race riots, when really this is just brutalization, it's terrorism, yeah, on their part. But in 1958, whereas my grandparents' generation, they came here and they had a thing called Pardner or Susu, where they, you know, as a collective saving scheme, and through their cooperative economics, they were able to buy a lot of homes over a period of time. And so one of the places that had a stronghold of a black population was Notting Hill in West London. And what happened was in 1958, for a couple weeks, yeah, groups of white youths are running through Notting Hill, beating up black men, women, and children, breaking into houses, and so on and so forth. And so this sparked what is called the Notting Hill race riots, whereby brothers and sisters began to fight back because the police were not doing anything about these attacks. Brothers and sisters came from Brixton, which is South London, all the way to West London to defend the brothers and sisters that were in West London. And as a result of this, many of the brothers were arrested for possession of an offensive weapon. And coming into 1959, a woman by the name of Claudia Jones, who was born in Trinidad, she actually lived in the United States for a while and ended up in Britain, basically brought the community together. She's an activist and staged the first what is called Caribbean Carnival in King's Cross in central London. But basically the proceeds from the event, yeah, were put towards paying for the legal fees of the brothers who had been arrested, yeah, for defending the community. All right, and the theme for the event was a people's art is the genesis of their freedom. Yeah, today Notting Hill Carnival is considered to be Europe's biggest street festival, but oftentimes it's divorced from the history that brought it about in the first place. Yeah, and so the cut a long story short, again, there's a growing spirit of activism in terms of Africans in this country. We get to the 1970s, whereby the Pan-African movement is very strong. Rastafari movement is very strong. Malcolm X had traveled here. Malcolm X traveled here in 1965. Baba Kwame Ture came here in 1967, I believe, and 1983. Yeah, and during the 1970s, Baba Julius Nyerere holds a Pan-African Congress, in Tanzania, and many of the brothers and sisters who are parts of organizations over here go to that conference. There's a bit of an ideological split, because as there always is, between the more socialists Pan-Africanist and the more black nationalist Pan-Africanists. The black nationalist split forms what is called the Pan-African Congress movement. Yeah. And they are instrumental in the bringing to the UK of Africa Liberation Day and also the celebration of Kwanzaa, yeah, in the 1970s. In fact, let me I'm gonna share a picture, if I may,
Yes.
of Africa Liberation Day in 1976 or 77. Yeah. So the story behind this is that they booked a building for Africa Liberation Day, but so much people turned up that the building was too small, so they had to take it to the park. Yeah. And this is thousands of people in the 1970s, 1976, 1977. I'm forgetting exactly which year. All right. And so these are the kinds of numbers that Africa Liberation Day was drawing in the 1970s. Yeah. And so basically it was one of the key events that politicized a generation of African people in this country. While you were battling against police brutality and lack of employment, underemployment, and all kinds of injustices in British society, whilst you were linking up with our brothers and sisters throughout the African diaspora, you know, who were facing similar things. In fact, the Pan-African Congress of Azania in South Africa was a primary inspiration for the development of Pan-African organizations in this country. And through African Liberation Day, we were able to connect with many of our brothers and sisters from the States also. So I grew up seeing Ishaka Musa Bara Shango, Baba Del Jones Nana Kuntu, who else? Baba Tony Martin, yeah. You know, all the greats, yeah, you know what I'm saying, that was on the scene over in the States at some point would have come over here for African Liberation Day, with the exception of Baba Amos Wilson, which is very unfortunate, but you know, it's got us a special shout out to Baba Amos Wilson. So that kind of answered the question.
Well, let me ask you, what's the population of Africans in England, in London, in Europe?
We are said to be just under 3% of the population. In numbers, that accounts for about 3 million people, half of which live in London, the city of London alone. Yeah, so we're not a very large population, but we punch above our weight in London, you know, as we do as African people.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to give
yeah. That's cool. So yeah, so basically. So then what happens is, obviously, another organization that is principal on the scene at that time develops as the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, which was led by Baba Kwame Ture, yeah,
yes.
during that time. But he traveled here in 1983, and that is for those who were on the scene at that time, that was a very significant visit, yeah, in terms of crystallizing the Pan-African focus and the development of Pan-African organizations in this country. There is a branch of the AAPRP in this country also, but those two organizations really kept the flag of African Liberation Day alive, yeah, from that time until now. So I become born into a Pan-African organization known as the Al-Qaeda and Revivalist movement that comes out of the black nationalist tradition of Pan-Africanism from that time. And so the African-centered the African-centered movement in this country was facilitated by elders like Elder Pepperkai, who's a member of the Pan-African Congress movement, but also was instrumental in terms of the development of Head Start books, yeah, which was based in North London. And Head Start was instrumental also because they used to have a thing called Sunday meetings. My father comes into the Pan-African movement through Head Start Sunday meetings, yeah. Head Start Sunday meetings was the equivalent of church for those who were revolutionary Pan-Africanists, yeah. And so they will go and be politically educated, culturally educated, and as a result of all of those meetings, my father begins to he was given the task of delivering his first presentation, which was on Patrice Lumumba and the independence movement of the Congo. And so in reclaiming his African name, he's inspired by Patrice Lumumba, and that is how my family gets the name Bandaka, because Bandaka is a place in the Congo. It's a part of it's a city in the Congo. Yeah, so I always give thanks to the Congo for giving me my name. I'm blessed to never have carried a European name for my entire life, and so we give thanks for that. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, the African Center community has been a staple within the Black community over here, particularly proliferating around Black bookshops and Black organizations. And so from that, you get the development of African naming ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, passing over ceremonies. I went through a rites of passage and manhood initiation ceremony, and then obviously all kinds of programs that are designed to serve the community, such as Saturday schools in particular, homeschoolers institutions, political education workshops and programs and classes, gang intervention programs, etc., etc., etc.
There's a lot of things that I would like to ask you if you would speak on, because I think your experience could also help African Americans here in America. What is homeschooling? Do you find that to be a substitute for the kind of schooling that, and see here, they don't teach very much on African history in the school system. There's just a few facts about Africans being enslaved, and pretty much that's it. But you know, we might learn something of Harriet Tubman, maybe Booker T. Washington, just a few, not very much of anything. So homeschooling is something that is needed.
Yes.
But you can tell us why it is necessary for homeschooling and how you go about it, and how your students manage to pass the tests that are done by the school board, and at the same time learn the history of themselves to become themselves, and at the same time become efficient in math, science, and all these other subject matters.
So I think that the first thing to say here is that as far as our sojourn in the UK is concerned, many of our independent educational institutions started as Saturday schools, and a lot of them began in church buildings. Obviously it was easier living in a country that is governed under the religion of Christianity for our brothers and sisters in the Black church to have access to premises, and so Black churches as well as Black activists started the first Saturday schools independently in the UK. Coming into the 80s and 90s, that was more, it became more and more the province of Pan-African organizations, principally because they were more concerned with the issue of teaching our history, reviving our history, and that kind of thing. I think that the homeschooling movement has something that has been developing really since the 90s, and I think there's two strains that brings people to the decision of homeschooling. The most popular is, my child is having problems in the mainstream education system. All right, they're in danger of being excluded, they're always in trouble with the teachers, I need an alternative. But more and more people are beginning to be very proactive as a result, instead of the previously mentioned reactive response, and understand that we want to give our child the best kind of education that is possible. And so a number of people have been developing as home education advocates. But usually these people were individuals who had taken their children out of school and were trying to give their children an education at home. However, those of us who were more in the Black Saturday school movement, that were bringing other people's children to premises to be able to teach them, were more inclined towards, we need homeschoolers and home education, but we need to do it communally. Yeah. So as a result of that, my organization had the Al-Kiblan Academy of Excellence, which was a Saturday school. So it is a Saturday school, and also we have the Ma'at Academy of Excellence, which is the full-time 5 days a week homeschoolers network. The need and the reason for homeschooling is basically primarily and principally based upon curriculum control, and also instilling our children with a sense of self, knowledge of self, self-pride, self-dignity, and these kinds of things, and which they're not going to get in the British education system. However, we are able to take them through their GCSEs, which is their the equivalent of what they call it in say again?
General diplomacy.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. When you finish high school, yeah. And there's two ways most people do that. Like you can have a pay to get. So if you're in mainstream education, you don't pay to do your GCSEs, but you can pay to do your GCSEs privately. Or some parents actually take their children through the homeschooling up until what is referred to as year 11, which is the final year of high school, and then place them in so that they can do their GCSEs as a part of the institution. But once they've gone through what we teach them, they're generally speaking ahead of their peers in terms of their education, and fortified with African-centered tools, even in mainstream subjects. For example, English language. We might teach Shakespeare, but we're also going to teach Aikwama. You know what I'm saying? And so their comprehension and their ability and their command of language is generally there anyway, and so they're able to eat up the exams regardless of what,
Now, in terms of what is happening in America and on the Caribbean, is the flow of information and knowledge about what is happening to us as a people and as an African people globally, is that flow of information readily available? I know we have the internet, and I can watch your TV program and you can watch mine. What has been the reaction to the killings of people like George Floyd, and just the wanton killings and murdering of African people by police and white people in general in America? How has that impacted the African community in London? Are you suffering the same intensity of oppression as we are?
The answer to that question is yes, but there are some nuances and some differences in terms of how it's affected us. There's been mass demonstrations, of Africans on the streets in response to the murder of brother George Floyd, Sister Breonna Taylor, and the other brothers and sisters who have been killed this year. And that's not for the first time. A few years ago, there were similar demonstrations in relation to Trayvon Martin and the other brothers and sisters who were killed around that time. In fact, I even going back to the 90s with Amadou Diallo, and Sean Bell. We were very much in tune with what was going, even in relation to O.J. Simpson. You'd be surprised how galvanized the Black community in the UK was in concert with our brothers and sisters in relation to the issue of O.J. Simpson and these kinds of things. So I mean, America itself casts a big shadow, but the Black community in the UK has generally been very Pan-African in our outlook of the world. So we're not so insular. Although some of that sensibility is beginning to creep in the longer we're here, but we're constantly in tune or engaged in what is going on in the Caribbean, on the continent, in the United States of America, and also because we do have a serious issue with police brutality and lack of justice for police brutality in this country. The first African on record to have been killed by the police is a brother by the name of David Oluwale in 1969. And then throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were many acts of police brutality and deaths in custody, as it is referred to over here, that sparked many uprisings. And I'll go through a few of them just so you know the history. So I've already mentioned 1958 with the race riots. In 1976, there was an uprising at Notting Hill Carnival in response to undue police force, that came to Notting Hill Carnival and basically harassing people trying to have a good time in revelment and enjoy the carnival spirit. So that was one uprising. And in the 1980s, I guess give your viewers a brief history of what is called the turbulent 80s, during which a lot of resistance was taking place on the ground in relation to police brutality. So we begin in 1981, whereby in January of 1981, there's a thing called the New Cross Massacre, whereby a house full of black men, women, and children celebrating the birthday of a sister by the name of Dawn Ruddock, was firebombed, and 13 young people perished, as a result of the fire. The cry was 13 dead and nothing said, because the British police, the Metropolitan Police, and the British media conspired to criminalize the young people who are survivors of that fire, rather than look for the person who firebombed the house. And because New Cross is an area of South London which was not estranged from acts of violence from white racists against young black people, and firebomb attacks, against young black racist firebomb attacks against young black people, it was generally believed that this attack was a racist firebomb attack, and the police botched the investigation, and the media worked to criminalize the young people. So as a result, the National Black People's Day of Action was called in March, of 1981. And that today stands as the biggest mass demonstration of black people. Tens of thousands of people came out to demonstrate against the injustices in the British society as sparked by the New Cross Massacre. But some would say, even more critically, in April of 1981, a thing called the Brixton Riot took place. And the Brixton Riot was in response to police brutality. So they had a thing called SUS laws. SUS is an abbreviation for suspicion. So brothers and sisters who could be arrested on the basis of the suspicion to commit a criminal offense, and this law, the SUS laws, were used to criminalize a generation, my parents' generation of young black men and women, but black men in particular. And sometimes it wasn't even about arresting, it was just about picking you up off the streets and putting you in police vans, beating you up and flinging you out on the road. So on one day in April of 1981, 100 and something arrests took place, and the police were basically very heavy-handed, and the brothers and sisters decided they're going to fight back. 1981 Brixton April sparked riots, so-called, or uprisings as we prefer to call them, all over the country. So in the cities of Birmingham, in the cities of Liverpool, Bristol, Toxteth, Luton, Manchester, Nottingham, High Wycombe, and a couple of other cities basically went up, in uprisings as a result. And there were a number of uprisings, smaller ones, in the years that follow. But then the biggest one, the major one, was in 1985 with what is called the Broadwater Farm uprising. And that two incidents sparked the Broadwater Farm uprising. One was the shooting of a sister by the name of Cherry Gross. She was shot through the chest in Brixton while the police were raided her home in pursuit of her son. And she was shot through the chest, and the bullet grazed her spine. And so she remained paralyzed and died in the year 2000 and something. I'm forgetting the year, forgive me. But as a result of complications from that injury. So that injury basically plagued her for the rest of her life. And then
in 2 months later, in Tottenham, which is North London. So Brixton is South London, Tottenham is North London. Police raid the house of Sister Cynthia Jarrett, again in pursuit of her son. As a result, in the pursuit of this raid, she dies in police custody. Yeah, and so Broadwater Farm in Tottenham kicks off into an uprising. As a result of that, within the midst of that uprising, a police officer lost his life. Yeah, PC Blakelock, and so the reprisal was that basically Broadwater Farm, which is an estate, or they call it blocks or projects, yeah, it's similar in the United States terminology, is under siege. Yeah, the police have got it on lockdown for months, and people like my father and my second mama, Mama Kai, are part of the community response campaign for justice for Broadwater Farm, justice on police brutality, and they even had to be smuggling. Because the police had the estate on lockdown, they had to be the black community organized to smuggle like food, water, onto the estate. And there is significant evidence to suggest that this was also the genesis of the influx of crack cocaine into the black community in London and throughout the UK. So I'm just saying that to say we've got a long history of police brutality and racist violence. There are other names that come to mind, like Colin Roach, like Anthony Walker, like Joy Gardiner, like Stephen Lawrence. You know, there are Sean Rigg. There are so many names, yeah, of brothers and sisters who have been slain in police custody in this country, and there has never been a police officer has never been tried and convicted with their murder.
I thought police did not carry guns in London. I mean, in England.
That is true to an extent. There are some police. So as a rule, police officers don't carry guns. There are some regiments of police that do carry guns on certain occasions, but you generally don't see police walking down the street with guns, and that has changed though significantly since so-called 9/11.
Brother Shaka, there's just a couple more things I want to cover with you, but
Yes,
I wanted to cover African religion with you. You spoke of Yoruba and so forth. But when we begin to talk of African religion, how does religion, say for example, like Yoruba, how does it come out of the African worldview of the oneness of life, the oneness of everything, in relationship to that worldview, that everything is everything? And the reason Africans, well, people say that they believed in water and rocks and they worship all these different gods, but they actually worship one deity, and that's Creator. So how do you relate the development of Yoruba out of that cosmic oneness with the universe?
So in relation to the Ifa or the Isheshe spiritual system, I see it really as a manifestation of what Baba Sheikh Anta Diop refers to as the cultural unity of Black Africa. The idea, and so when I say that, what I mean is you're going to find the same philosophical foundation in ancient Kemet, in our ancestors or people of the Zulu cosmology, or of the Bakongo cosmology, or in Kikuyu in East Africa. I've been learning about the Oromo and Somali indigenous spiritual system, and you're finding the same vibration.
You know, and then our traditions in West Africa, whether it's Fudan or whether it's Ifa or whatever. The idea is essentially nature based, that we are a part of nature and that all existence is connected by a foundational and fundamental essence or source or force. Yeah. And so because of that, all creation is seen as a oneness. So when people say that, use terms like polytheism, it's a misnomer. This is European cultural thought, yeah, being imposed upon African people. The African conceptualizes creation as many manifestations of a one, yeah, a one foundational fundamental essence. And so that comes out of us in our culture, because our culture is essentially nature-based and built upon harmony with nature. Giving reverence to the ocean is giving reverence to the ocean in terms of the fact that it sustains our lives, but also the fact that the ocean is a part of us and we are a part of it. The same with the tree. The tree is a part of us and we are a part of it. Our ancestors observe that we have a symbiotic relationship with the tree in terms of the air that we breathe is emitted from the trees, and the air that the tree breathes, yeah, is emitted from us as human beings. And so all of these aspects symbolize our connectedness with the one universe, and we call that through names like Amen Ra, through names like Olodumare or Olorun, through names like Nzambi, through names like Nkulunkulu, yeah, and all of the names that we have across the length and breadth of the African continent. But I think that we also should do due diligence in terms of delving into the deep philosophy of our spiritual systems, because if we look at, if using what you said, the Yoruba and the Ifa spiritual system, if we look at terms like Ori, yeah, which means head but relates to consciousness, and Ashe, which is life force but is also the power of the word that brings things into manifestation, we will see that in the language and the concepts, we are all constantly reinforcing our connectedness with the universe, our oneness with the universe, and the universe in us.
Okay. We could go on, and what I'd like to do is set up a program with you that we talk more about Yoruba and its indigenous relationship with the ancient cosmology of how it develops out. But I will let you go. We can bring this program to a close, only to continue it, since this is the first time we've had an opportunity to really meet and talk. But before that, what I'd like to comment is I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank your queen, your wife, and I'd like to congratulate you. You have all of my prayers for your child. Well, was it a boy or a girl?
Boy. His name is Kundisai Chenzira Takuma Amaru Mashinini Payam Bandaka. You know, what, saying, he gave him a beautiful name.
You were there for the birth?
I saw everything, and that's partly what the video that you were showing at the beginning. Because I started writing these reflections online, just, you know, daily after he was born, and you know, people said I should do something with it, so I started doing videos about the things that I reflected. It's been a while since I've done one. I haven't finished all of them, but yeah, the video that you showed at the beginning was the first one, where it's just me reflecting on the magic of seeing my son come into the world. So yeah, man, I'm a very proud father.
Oh man, that's so powerful. Now, do you think that will help families stay together if fathers will begin being there when their children are seeing their children born? What kind of effect did it have on you? I know you just said that it had a tremendous, powerful, godly effect, in fact. But would that help keep families together, you think?
I think so. I am of the opinion that in relation to our manhood, we need to reappraise African manhood and redefine it. European culture cannot define African manhood for African people, and I'm sorry to say, but nor can feminism. Feminism cannot define African manhood for African people, and so when we look into our tradition and we study the work of greats like contemporarily Baba Mwalimu Baruti and Baba Amos Wilson, you can see them trying to do work to reappraise our manhood. And part of that for me, an essential component of that for me, is assessing ourselves in the role of father and in the role of husband, and what that means, the nurturing aspect of us as African men. And I'm of the opinion that dedication to our women and being there for the birth of our children is very important. Now, I say that knowing that traditionally there are some traditions whereby as a man you don't go there. That's the domain for the women, and the women gather. Yeah, which I don't have a problem with. I really don't have a problem with, as and where that takes place, as and where it's possible. But we understand that today, especially us living in the West, we don't always have those communal systems that are around us to be able to manifest in that kind of way. So I definitely, I cannot. Words cannot express what it is to see a child come into the world, and it definitely had a profound impact upon me, and also a profound impact upon my understanding and appreciation of women, yes, and what women go through, and my woman in particular. I think it adds something to us as men to be a part of that process very intimately.
Okay. Wow. Our children are born primarily in hospitals. So the first image they see, even they see their mother, is a white doctor. And then growing up, and all the images that they see, because we watch a tremendous amount of television, Black folk do, all images there primarily are the images that are in control, and the heroes are white people, whether they're men or women, and white families. And, they are projected as families that get along, and, all this togetherness and control and power. So that it is no wonder then that Black children growing wherever, whether it's in Europe or America, are always been embedded with European images that are in control, that are the heroes of the situation. So it's kind of natural for Black people to see white people as the final say, because white people control the the systematic system that owes their lives in every dimension. What we grow up with from birth, rather than your son looking in your eyes, children look in the eyes of white folk, and that way from birth to death. So I thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to our next lecture, our next having you on our TV program to both educate us and share what's happening in London. So again,
let me just say thank you, my elder. So can I just say thank you, my elder, and keep up the good work. I've been watching this channel for years, because you've got all the good John Clark and the good Amos Wilson, and these are people that I'm saying that I watch religiously, and so I'm very appreciative of the work of this particular channel, and I'll continue to watch, and I'm going to do my best. In fact, I guarantee that I will bring Brother Robin Walker to you as soon as possible and put you in tune.
Hey man, I thank you. That's so. All the thing I got to say is, brother, I thank you, and let's move forward. Today has been a beautiful day. Thank you
Thank you
again.
very much. Thank you.
And thank you,
Appreciate it.
family. Peace.
Greetings.